Hi folks, it's just been a few days since we introduced 6 new laying hens to our flock. Let's go and see how they're getting on. So they seem to be getting on really well. We introduced them to each other after a day or two. We were going to do it a bit longer than that, but everything seemed to be fine. Obviously there's a little bit of pecking and a little bit of chasing as the pecking order's figured out, but actually they've been really, really good. The new ones are quite nervous, of course, because they're young, so they stick together, they roost on the same bar together, and they're always making sure that they're sort of far enough away from the existing flock so they don't get bullied. The irony is that the chicken that was bullied the most when we introduced her to our old flock a few years ago, she's become top dog, so she's the one that's doing all the bullying at the moment. She's obviously top hen now, so she got her time. What I've started doing, now that we've been here for about a week and they're used to their enclosure, they know that that's where safety is and they're sticking together there. We did have one who escaped one night, and luckily it came back the next day. She got over the fence, she hadn't had her wings clipped by that point, got over the fence and was gone for the night, but thankfully next day she knew where safety was and she came back, which is brilliant. Since then we've clipped one of the wings of each of them, and that just stops them from being able to fly over this fence, and it keeps them safe, keeps them away from foxes, so it's in their interest and doesn't hurt them. It's the right thing to do, definitely. Now what I'm doing, now that we've been here for a week, I'm starting to let them out of the enclosure and just to start exploring and improving their diet. There's more little grubs and things like that in the woods. Sometimes they need a little bit of encouragement to get out of the cage. Obviously that's where safety is, but I want them to get used to being safe in the woods, so a little bit of a nudge. So the new girls aren't laying just yet. We're still just getting 1 egg a day at the moment from the old chickens. Should be probably a couple more weeks before the new ones start laying, and then we should have 4 or 5 delicious fresh eggs every day. So they seem pretty happy in the woods. I'll just leave them out there for a couple of hours. They can get back in the enclosure if they want to, for water or for layers, pellets or whatever, but usually they just pick at grubs, stick together in a group, and then usually make their way back in a few hours' time. Later on, if I need to get them back in, I can shake the corn tin. That always works because they love corn, and so they get used to the sound of that tin, and over the last week I've been sort of training them to that sound, and so shake the tin and they'll all come running. So this point of year in the polytunnel is amazing. There's just so much abundance, there's so much growing. The tomato plants are basically grown as much as they're going to. I've now topped the tomato plants to stop them growing any further, and just to let the tomatoes start to mature and to ripe, the ones that are there, and the flowers that are existing to turn into tomatoes. But I don't want the plants to get any bigger because they're already bending over at the roof. We've also got aubergines coming. They're getting larger and larger, which is fantastic. We've got one really nice one, but what I want to do is wait a little bit longer until we've got several, because there's no point in having one aubergine. So hopefully that one will be fine, but you can see there's quite a lot of flowers appearing, so I really think we're going to get a good crop this year, which is very exciting. I've tried to grow aubergines in the past and they just rotted on the vine, or they just were tiny, just didn't work. This polytunnel's really warm, and so plenty of warmth, plenty of light for them, so fingers crossed. We've also got chilies going, and you can see the chilies are really starting to come. These ones are jalapeno chilies, which unfortunately don't look like they're doing very well. We hopefully will get a few, but just for some reason the jalapenos haven't done nearly as well as the cayenne peppers. We'll leave the cayenne to get red, and they'll get really red and feisty and hot. That's great. So I think we're going to get a really massive crop of them, and they store really well, so that's great. But jalapenos we love, we're just not going to get as many as those. So next year I'll probably try something different. We've also got bell peppers, and at the moment they're tiny. They're not really coming on. So I'm hoping we're going to get a crop of those, but you know, we're now into sort of mid-August. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. They did seem to struggle in this compost, and it took a long time to get going. And also in the house, when I was originally growing them from seed, when the seedlings were there, they were just really struggling. I bought peat-free compost from the garden centre, not a good one. I thought it would be fine for that stage, but they just didn't grow particularly strongly when they were young. And that seems to be the case, that if they don't grow really well when they're young, or all crops, they don't have a really good start in life, then they tend to struggle a bit later on. With the tomatoes, we're processing them as much as we can. Shara's been doing an incredible job. We've been eating a lot of them, but also turning them into tomato ketchup, freezing some, putting some in jars so that we can have them later in the year. The aim to grow this many tomatoes was to be able to preserve and to learn how to preserve. So it's a bit of an experiment for us, but we're certainly getting loads and loads of crops, so that's very exciting. We've got beefsteak tomatoes, we've also got normal vine tomatoes, and then loads of really juicy, delicious cherry tomatoes. So they're very difficult to bring into the house because they just don't seem to get that far. Also with the tomatoes, I'm trying to stop any more overgrowth. So sometimes on the end of the truss you get a second growth. I normally take those off. I also snip off the side shoots. I've been doing that all the way through the growth process, because you want one main vine rather than lots of different individual vines that splay all over the place. They're difficult to control, they weigh the plant down, and you want all of the growth to first of all create a lovely strong main vine, and then all the growth to be going into the actual fruit itself. And if you have lots of side shoots coming off, it just turns into a big gnarly bush. So it's dead easy. You just pick off all the side shoots as they're growing up, and that basically keeps things under control. You can see here also I've got this drip irrigation system, and that's been working really well. It is warm in here, and I don't want to come and have to splay loads and loads of water all over the beds, particularly because we've had a hosepipe ban this summer. And this drip irrigation system comes on for 20 minutes, half an hour every morning, and the water's directed straight at the roots of the plants, and they seem to love it. It seems to work really, really well. The other thing that's doing so good at the moment is cucumber. It's cucumber season right now, so we've almost got more that we can handle. Unfortunately, a couple of people in our family, they got COVID, obviously, as we all did a few years ago, and since then they can't stand the flavour of cucumbers. Me, I love them, but we've got so many of them, we're starting to pickle them, we're doing all sorts of preserves and just trying to use this crop. The nice thing also at this time of year, when there's so much abundance, you're producing more than you need, it's really nice to be able to give away to friends and family and people like that. You know, you go around to someone's house, you take some produce, or someone comes and visits, you give them some produce. It costs you nothing, but it tastes amazing, they're delighted, you're happy to get rid of it. It's a win-win. It's such a nice part of this year.